Hello everyone and welcome to what is the first installment of what could be a new video series, which is beautifully named Creative Chats. So first guest is someone that I've talked to before on various social media and stuff like that, Jaz Davies. So Jaz, introduce yourself.
So, hello everyone. I am a good friend of Reese's. I would consider myself now. We've spoken a lot before on various live streams, worked together on some events actually. I own my own company, Davis Creative Co. We're going to start off by plugging that. And yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So yeah, last time we sort of left off, we talked a lot about Davies Creative Co., the sort of effects of events on COVID-19 and everything like that. So have you got any new projects coming up?
So we obviously still have Whisperfest, hopefully in September. So Falmouth have kind of said that they're going with this blended learning approach. So whether that actually happens, we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, I hope. I mean, it's with a place like Falmouth, you do need a lot of the facilities with people doing almost like there are certain aspects of it that are almost entirely group work based. So you kind of need that in there, really.
Yeah. But apart from that, I think the most recent addition to the company as a whole is what I've titled Davis Creative Blogs.
Yeah.
So I've done, I don't even know how many posts I've done now, but I've obviously spoken a little about Whisperfest Live, which we did, feels like forever ago.
Mm-hmm.
I've spoke on there about mental health because obviously we've had Mental Health Awareness Week about a month ago now, and just kind of exploring that. So obviously we touched last time in that live stream about the that ebook that I'd written about kind of quarantine and coronavirus. And I've always had a passion for writing, so this is just something that I thought, let's give the people some content while I have nothing else going on.
That's fair. I mean, your blog seems to be going pretty well. I mean, you've done the mental health thing, you've done the Black Lives Matters post, and you've done the interviews. Is that sort of, I guess, is that something that you're just going to be doing sort of on the side, or is that something that you want to become sort of a core part of Jaz Davies? Do you want it to become a lot more about sort of the blog and your opinions as well as the events in the business?
Yeah, so I've kind of shifted my thinking in terms of the whole company as a whole over the past couple months, going from just give me all the business I can, let's market, to specifically events marketing. And the blog itself, I am a very strongly opinionated person, so I do want to keep it centered on events, and when we have things coming up, talk about them, and that will obviously be the main focus. But I think for all matters, particularly like the Black Lives Matter movement at the moment, it's really important for me to speak up about it. And I think having that blog as a way of doing that in a more constructive way, and not just Facebook, because there have been some
Yeah.
crazy stuff that I've seen.
Yeah, it gets lost in just the pile of just information on social media, so you can focus it a little bit more.
Definitely.
I guess kind of the similar thinking with this, the sort of the video
Yeah.
podcast style thing, because I felt that like there's a lot to talk about, and sometimes having a way for people, like creatives in particular,
Yeah.
to talk. So this is where, and in a similar way, your blog is a place for people to talk about those sorts of things, which is a
So
really.
what have you been like? Because I've seen that you've been looking at more recording stuff, and obviously you've got your camera there. So what have you actually been doing? Never mind me for a sec, because I know that you've been doing a lot recently in terms of music and just everything.
Yeah, mainly I think a lot of it has to do, a lot of what I've been doing recently has had less really to do with music in a way. It has definitely had more to do with the camera. I think it's more a case of like the last couple of weeks I've definitely particularly found that like social media has become a real big problem with music, because you always want to produce content for your social media to do with your music and everything like that.
Mm.
But I was finding myself basically just posting for the sake of posting, and everything that I
Yeah.
did was just kind of it didn't mean anything. It was nothing. It was just sort of throwaway extra content on the side that I was just like, I've got to push it, got to get it out. I got to stay relevant. I think that's a problem that you find with social media in general, is that if you're not consistently posting, your engagement just goes down instantly.
I think that's, as a company that is only a few months old, especially, I'm kind of terrified of that. So I know that I don't have a massive following as it is anyway.
Yeah.
But I think my biggest fear is, although like people in my circle know, obviously my family, friends, like yourself, know about it. If I'm not, producing content for people to find, and if I don't keep up my website, then what happens when, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a scary thought.
Yeah, it's, you need to keep that cycle going, otherwise you fear that you're going to sort of fall out of the sort of public eye, really. So I think for me, I was sort of trying to come up with ideas of ways that I could produce things to go alongside the music, but not for it to not be just, here's me in a microphone kind
Yeah.
of thing, sort of throwaway stuff that no one really wanted. So I thought, well, I had the idea, of course, the creative chats, which is what we're doing here,
Yeah, very
which
exciting.
I think I've got 2 other people already lined up. This is the first one to be filmed, so it will probably
Yeah.
be episode 1. And then hopefully we're going to have 2 more filmed very soon. One is with another musician, and another one is with the producer. So that's really good. Oh, you there? Oh, I can hear you now. That's good. I can hear you now. Okay, you're back.
Okay. I thought we were going to have a meltdown. Okay.
Yeah. Have you found have you been more annoyed by your internet throughout this time than anything else more in your household? It's just the
Yes.
internet just will not
Yes.
work. It is
Yes.
an absolute nightmare.
We've had like another kind of router installed, almost like we've got like a plugging things, like an extra Wi-Fi, because of how bad it's not
Yeah,
very good.
it's a nightmare. The problem, like, yeah, I think it was literally in this house that I'm at the moment. It was literally until about, I think, 3 or 4 years ago, where we still had the internet and the phone running on like the same line. So like, if someone picked the phone up, the whole internet would go down. And this was like
Oh my God.
2015, and this was still happening. And we were just like, oh no.
Oh dear. Yeah, no, it's been a weird adjustment. I think everybody at the minute is just wanting it to be over. Like, I think more than last time, because it just feels like we're just waiting for it to end. I don't
Yeah,
know when it's going to end, but I just want it to end.
yeah. It's weird because at the end of the month, of course, it's going to be my birthday at the end of the month, and my mum asked me like, "What are you going to be doing for your birthday?" And I was literally thinking, I was like,
Oh,
the thought about even socializing has just gone from my mind.
I
Like,
know.
just inviting friends around or saying hi to people is just gone. Like, don't even do that. I'm just gonna sit in my bedroom and do nothing all day, basically.
Going to be great fun. No, it's hard because I think the guidelines set out by, like, and I know that everybody, I think this kind of is going blind, don't really know what's going on, don't know what's going to happen, and everyone's just really anxious about a second wave, and just everything's happening. But the guidelines themselves have always been a little bit confusing, apart from, the general message of stay home, I
Yeah,
find anyway. But I think, weirdly enough, I've never been big into news. I've never liked to watch the news, but especially over the past couple of weeks, I found myself like glued to it every morning, just watching the world fall apart, basically.
yeah. I found myself doing that. I think a lot of people have done that recently. It's very reminiscent, I find, of whenever an election happens, and I spend my entire time doing nothing but looking at the news. The problem is that the turnout never happens the way I like, so it's always a lot of negative energy,
hmm
which is a problem, But on the subject of news, I guess we had a discussion before coming on this about topics
Yeah.
we wanted to talk about, and I feel like, I mean, as well as the big elephant of COVID-19 in the room. I feel like there's
Mhm.
another one that's emerged in the last couple of weeks, and it's one that you
Yes.
recently wrote an article about on your blog. So
Yes, it
would you
is.
like to talk about the article and sort of go from there?
Yeah, so I just want to first, as a disclaimer for anybody watching, don't get me wrong, before the murder of George Floyd, I had never actively involved myself in learning about racism. I'd never really experienced it firsthand or, had it around me. So it was something that I never truly considered myself a part of, that I needed to learn about. But I think this is the first time, and what's kind of become apparent from it. I think this is on a global scale. You've got people protesting and finally
Mm.
speaking about race, and using their voices, their platforms. And I kind of feel, as a white woman, more than anything else, I do feel in a sense a duty to learn and to talk about it. And I come, just for some context, I live in a very small town in a relatively small county.
Mm.
We have a Conservative MP. We don't we're very sheltered and very small minded.
Join the club.
So, mhm.
Join the club.
And I find it, like I say, I think that's part of the reason why it's never been a concern for me. And so the article that I wrote was because, from watching the news and hearing about everything that happened, I just felt outraged. It disgusted me to see and to finally hear about it. It's like a light switch went off in my brain,
Yeah.
and I was immediately researching and watching all these YouTube videos. And I, more than anything, I just cried.
Yeah.
It's There are so many videos, particularly I think the John Boyega speech from is it the Hyde Park protest,
I
one of
think
the ones in London. Yeah,
think you linked
um,
that on your blog.
I
You linked
do.
one of the
Mm.
videos. So yeah, it was a powerful speech, definitely.
It's very passionate, and it made me so emotional.
Mm.
And it was a very overwhelming thing. And I still have all of these books to read. There are so many resources that I still need to read through, and just to kind of grasp this, because it's embedded in pretty much every society. Particularly, I think in the UK, it's very weird for us because it's not outright and it's not violent. What we have is more subtle and, just very ingrained, but just not entirely obvious to a lot of people.
I
Um,
agree with that. I think it's very easy for us to. I think there's often this comparison that I think that we have in this country where we see these scenes that are happening in America and everything like that. And I've definitely done this myself and see that and be like, oh, thank God that's not here. That
yeah.
kind of that attitude. And while there is some truth to that with certain cultural things that happen in
Yeah.
America, I think that there is more similarities that we often try to brush aside. And we're like, that's not here. I think for me, one of the things was talking about the sort of racism in this country. I remember someone sort of pointed out, like, we lived in a country with like things like Britain First and Tommy
Yeah.
Robinson and stuff like that. And I was like, oh yeah, yeah, that exists. So it's like something,
It's
something that, like, if you'd asked me a couple of years ago, you said the name Tommy Robinson, I would have been like, what an absolute racist. I hate him, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And all that. And then when this popped up, it took me a little while for it to like properly register.
Mm.
And yeah, and I think once it registered, I was like, okay, yeah, I see why there's protest in this country as well as in the US. And I think
Yeah, I think it's the thing that's so important for me is that if this wasn't happening during coronavirus, I
mm,
think a lot more people would probably be on board with the whole protesting with
yeah,
everything that's going on. Um, but I think it's really important, and I've seen so many things, even on Facebook, to be honest, at the minute, about saying that all of the significant changes that have happened, not just in British, but in the world's history, are have happened because of protesting. You
Mm,
don't achieve change by not protesting. And
yeah.
it's hard. So the protest that we were supposed to be having a protest here in Bridge North today at about this time actually, but it got cancelled on us.
Mm,
We weren't allowed to, essentially, which is a big kick in the teeth because just reinforces the fact that we live in a I think a hidden racist little community here. It's so ridiculous.
yeah.
Um,
I find that happens when you're in a little place like this. I mean, I live in a very, I guess, in a quite similar sort of position. You know, we live in a town which is deemed as a deprived community. We It's very sort of it's quite traditional. You know, the ages here are sort of like this sort of 40 to
older.
50-year-old people. It's the older generation. You have a big fishing market down here, those sorts of things. Um,
Yeah.
and I mean, very similar, I guess, in the way of places like Falmouth and Cornwall, there isn't this massive diversity of
Yeah.
people um, in this area. And I think that that does just, the people that live here do have a disconnect from what's happening elsewhere in the country. I think one of the biggest examples I can think of is when I literally stayed for like one night in London in like a hostel, and I was, for as far as I could see, the only person there speaking English,
Yeah.
which in London, like the capital of England, and the only person in that place was speaking English was me. And I think that sort of showed the difference between somewhere like London and somewhere like here. That you would
Yeah.
never get that here. You know, you go to a hostel or a hotel or somewhere like that, and you know everyone's going to be, you know, speaking English. They're all from sorts of places, that kind of thing. So there is a big disconnect there.
I think it's interesting because again one of the most recent things that I've read about is actually a Falmouth University student. I don't want to say a name wrong, but I'm going to go with Mealy,
Mm,
talking about her experiences of racist comments and kind of prejudice actually at the university itself and
yeah,
in Falmouth, which in some ways, because I know that it's everywhere and no matter what there's always been an undercurrent of racism in the UK, it doesn't
yeah,
surprise me, which in itself is upsetting, but it
mm,
was just it's just shocking to read. And the university have since put out their statement saying that they're developing this kind of, I don't know whether it's an app program, whatever they're trying to do, but it sometimes feels like it's not enough
mm,
because it should be there in the first place. We should be able to protect, the black people are entitled to the same rights as us. They're human
yeah,
beings.
yeah. I know.
And for them to not have the same experience and not feel safe, especially somewhere where we've both come to uni, we've both just like finished our first year. It's all very, you know what I mean. I wouldn't expect it to be like that. So for them to hear that it is kind of like a
Mm,
personal hit because it's almost inescapable.
yeah, absolutely.
So what
Is
else have we got?
I think it's definitely good. One good thing that's come out of it is the fact that there has been. I mean, looking at Falmouth as an example, there has been a big, not just like a big like up speaking of people who've had this experience, but a big drive from the people there to push it and get something resolved, which I don't think would have happened if we weren't going through
Yeah.
this time. I think a lot of people would have been more willing to write it off as just a one incident, but instead it's become a more apparent, and people are like, okay, let's do something about it,
Yeah.
which is a positive thing.
I think that's probably what I will say is that the conversation that's been opened up because of what's happened is
Mm,
probably this won't go away until something is done and something is resolved. The protests
mm,
won't stop. Even now, once the police officers involved in George Floyd's death have now been charged and whatever, people aren't just going to rest because they've been put away. I think a lot of people, it kind of expected that to happen, but I from what I've read, and even if you just do a quick Google search, there's so many articles, documentaries, things that people can read about, and I implore anyone who's watching to go do that. But it's just to have gone through so much oppression and be treated in such a manner with this constant target on your back for years upon years coming out of slavery. I cannot imagine how angry Black people, I cannot imagine the anger that they feel, the upset that they feel. And so the cases of, you know, the Edward Colston statue being taken down in Bristol, that sort of thing, I know that a lot of people in power are all saying, you know, I don't agree with them taking it down, even if it is, you know, it's just, I get it. If I was in that same position, I would want to be, you know, taking revenge in some way for what I've been put through.
Yeah, I know. I think
No, you go.
okay, yeah, I think it's very easy when you're not in that position you know, to say that, oh well, it shouldn't have been taken down, that kind of thing. It's really easy to be in that sort of position, but I think at the same time, I agree that it is a symbol of, in many ways, it is a symbol of the oppression that many people in that community will take to heart. They think that, you know, being in a society that memorializes that coincidentally still believes that those people are to be celebrated.
And I think it's so, especially with the Edward Colston statue, there was petitions before then of the people in Bristol to have it. Even before then, it was to have a plaque on, just kind of talking about his history, obviously his connection with slavery, that sort of thing, so people were more aware. But the council or whoever it was up to nothing ever came of it, and that
Yeah.
obviously made people angry. And I think what's the good thing that's come out of that is there's actually, if I get this up, so obviously after his statue's been taken down, since then Belgium has taken down its King Leopold II statue. The Robert Milligan statue in London's been taken down. These iconic monuments and halls and all this kind of memorials and stuff are, everything's being reconsidered in a way that, thinking back on the people who have been in some ways immortalized in these names and all of that has been reconsidered, which I think is really important, because what they symbolize to a lot of people is just pain.
Yeah.
and it's a real kick in the teeth for those to still be apparent. So we have, I think, in Shrewsbury, I can't remember his name. Like I said, I still have so much to read up on and learn about all this, but we have a couple nearby here, which say, people asking whether it should be, and obviously being in a very conservative, heavily conservative area, you get everybody saying no, and not even in the sense that we should be taught about them, but just because why should they be allowed to do that, all this kind of stuff, which is really hard to listen to. And I actually know someone personally who's been sharing stuff online, essentially going with the whole, you know, looting isn't protesting, which
Yeah,
really
I've
breaks my gears.
yeah, it's been a big mixture, really. You have people on. I find in the age of social media is that you're not allowed to be somewhere in the middle. You have to be on one side of an argument or the other side of an argument. And if you're not, then, you know, yeah, if you're one side, one half will hate you, and if you're on the other side, one half will hate you. But if you're in the middle, both sides will hate you.
So
In that kind of sense. Yeah. Um, so yeah, I find that a lot. The sort of the arguments. I think something I find quite interesting. Well, interesting. There's a lot of people that are doing that thing of, if you believe a certain way, unfriend me, block me, that kind of thing.
yeah.
And I find that, like, it's the same thing that happens again. I'm pulling on like elections and stuff like that, which happen. Like, that happens all the time. Like, if that kind of thing. And then you get to an election, and then your specific party loses, and you're like, why is that losing? No one supports them. It's like, well, they do. It's just that everyone who supported that you cut out of your life. And I think that's the same thing with this. Everyone who has a certain belief, they'll just instantly cut out. And I feel like that doesn't solve the problem. It just removes it out of your own life. It doesn't stop racism because they're still there. And I think there needs to be more of an approach from some people about, instead of saying, if you believe a certain way, unfriend me, it's like, if you believe a certain some way, why? So we can talk about it, kind of thing. Because you'll never end racism unless you turn the people who think in a racist way and change their minds.
Yeah, so I think the problem that I've had with this whole, because trust me, I haven't deleted these people that feel this way and share these posts. I've just kind of been observing and trying to just say, educate them, leave the resources in the comments without being too passive aggressive, which
Yeah.
has been hard.
Mm.
But essentially going, because I'm on the opposite side to a lot of people who are, because they say that they're obviously not racist and they're in support of the protests, but like the looting isn't peaceful. But in the same way, what happened to George Floyd, murder isn't policing.
No.
And it's definitely hard for me to hold my tongue. Like I said, I'm very highly opinionated, and I'm still sharing all this kind of stuff, which is talking about the issue all the time. And because even those close to me, so my mum, not to name names, but she doesn't necessarily want to educate herself about it. She'd rather just remain ignorant, which is, I mean, given where we live, I get, but it's quite upsetting when I've just kind of all of a sudden got really passionate about it, which is, it's such an important issue to educate ourselves on, to just say no, I don't really want to learn about it. It is silly, and but I still want to understand why people think the way that they do. And I get it, though, what's happened at protests isn't necessarily peaceful, but just put yourself in their shoes. Just imagine what they must have gone through. You don't experience what black people and all these ethnic minorities do on a daily basis. You would be angry, and for all these expressions, and I mean, what Donald Trump's been saying before now has not really helped. And I think
He's genuinely the two worst possible things that could have happened during this movement is a global pandemic and
yeah.
Trump. It's
Yes.
genuinely the things that you watch, and the things that he's saying and stuff like that are just some pretty unbelievable stuff. And again, like, I understand why some of the people saying that, like, if it was Obama saying those things, he wouldn't be able to get away with that in the same way.
Yeah, it's I think the problem is with Trump. I think people are very polarized, and you have those who are completely supporters and will never. But that's because they're who they are. That's not today's discussion.
No.
And then you've got those who are completely anti. I don't think you can have a middle when it comes to Trump. And the
No.
things that he's been saying, like when the looting starts, the shooting starts, and we all know that he's a racist anyway. It's he has not helped the problem. So I actually got in touch with what's her name now, the MP for Truro and Falmouth.
Yeah.
Just as there's a document somewhere which has a whole list of resources to where you can find your local MP, and just a whole email format. So again, please get in touch, and if they haven't said anything, tell them that they should.
Yeah.
And she was essentially said that her thoughts are with George, the family of George Floyd, and she kind of commends people on their protesting and things like that. She just doesn't commend the tearing down of statues, and it looked very automated. But I know that I'm imagining loads of people are doing that at the minute, and trying to force that you speak out kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's just I don't know. It's weird. It's weird when people in power believe this way, that because obviously they're Democrats, and they have to do everything in a very democratic way. So Nigel Farage, for instance, he was on Good Morning Britain the other day, And he was getting so irate, saying that the whole tearing down of the Edward Colston statue was mob rule and it wasn't done in a democratic way. But the comments that he's made about the whole Black Lives Matter movement before now is utterly disgusting. So I don't actually think he is in any way in a place to comment. So I think, from what I've seen this morning on Twitter, he's been removed from the LBC.
Yeah.
And on the segment that he was on, he's also just a classic example of a white man, a racist white man in power. Excluding everything that he said about, Black Lives Matter, even before then, everything to do with UKIP. He's still the leader of the Brexit party, for crying out loud. Like, everything about it is just mental.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Oh dear. So I don't know whether you actually saw his comment, but the thing he's been called out most on is his comparison of the whole Black Lives Matter movement and protesters to the Taliban.
Oh boy. Oh boy. Right. So how?
I think it was his way of arguing this was somewhat the way that they're, vandalizing these statues and tearing them down without any kind of democratic, any kind of consensus on it or something. It is similar to that of, and I was just thinking, but it's not. you are comparing these. It just isn't. I found it so hard to listen to because he was getting so angry with these people telling him how can you compare that and all this kind of. It was weird. Weird.
Yeah. Weird.
Sorry, my mum's just come upstairs.
Does remind me, are you a tea drinker or a coffee drinker?
I am a tea drinker.
I'm also a tea drinker. That's very good. This is cold tea, but
mine hasn't stayed. No, I used to be a big coffee drinker. I used to really love like cappuccinos, and they just dry my mouth out now. I know not everybody understands that, but they do. So I don't have them.
I've never really drunk coffee, and the times I have, I've just been very sort of underwhelmed by it, really. So I've never been that much of a coffee drinker, but I think tea, like, that's been a staple in my family for, like, probably generations, so...
Been drinking it since I was 12.
Oh, yeah. I remember, like, the first time I had, like, a cup of tea, and I was, like, so proud of myself. I was like, I'm grown up. This is where it's at.
Me too, honestly. It was a great moment in my life. Right, so what else? Honestly, this document that I made over the past few days, and it's just very immense.
It's quite an immense. I think what I find so funny was comparing our notes before coming on here, how I had about 120 bullet pointed questions, and Jaz had 1,800 words of an entire speech laid out.
Yeah.
The entire thing, which perfectly describes the difference between me and Jaz.
Yeah, so I think the next thing that I want to just get onto, talking more about the Black Lives Matter movement, just because it's something that I am just so fascinated by, is so from my research, like the statistics, I can never say that word, that I found. So, you ready?
Oh yeah, okay. I'm ready.
So, according to the 2010 American census, white and Asian children had the lowest rates of poverty of any ethnic group, and blacks obviously had the highest level at 38.2%. And then linking this back to the whole pandemic that we're currently living in, black people have actually been found to be dying at higher rates from coronavirus. And I think that, at least in part, that is to do with the kind of economic positions that they're in. So blacks relative to whites are more likely to live in neighborhoods with a lack of healthy food options, green spaces, recreational facilities, lighting and safety. These subpar neighborhoods are rooted in the historical legacy of redlining, and they are often more likely to live in densely populated areas, which is obviously, as we all know, further heightening their potential contact with other people, spread of coronavirus. And I think the main thing being is that because of the positions that they're in a lot of the time, it's not as easy for them to access healthcare in the same way that white people would.
Yeah, are those numbers in this country or in America?
So the American census one's just about poverty. That's obviously relevant to America. And I think it would probably be a lot different in a lot of ways for the UK itself. But the whole, dying from COVID numbers are, I think, on a global.
Because I think with the Americans and everything like that, I think one area which I think would help in that sort of scenario is a more nationalized health service to be implemented. I mean, of course, not too into oh, look how great the NHS is, that kind of thing, of which the NHS is great. However, I think when you see those numbers of people, people in the minority groups are less likely to be, well, more likely to be in the sort of in areas ridden with poverty. You do get into a scenario. It's like, well, people in those communities feel more scared about the COVID-19 and the effects of like that because of the fact that they just can't afford the healthcare. And I think the governments need to make every single government in like sort of like the matured societies that we live in would need to make sure that every ethnic group and every level of the financial scale has the ability to access the treatment that they need for COVID-19. I think that is, as I said, with the National Health Service in this country, it helps, but I think that's something that in places like America, that is definitely a change that needs to be considered.
I think I've thought that for years because even the prices that they have to pay are extortionate.
Oh yeah.
But the information, so I took this information from one particular article. I can't remember where it's from, but I'm sure if anybody just had a quick search, they'd find it. Which essentially says that they're also less likely to have equitable healthcare access, meaning hospitals are farther away and pharmacies are subpar. So leading to more days waiting for urgent prescriptions. So it's healthcare resources are criminally inadequate in their neighborhoods, which I do think is some ways relevant. I know that with coronavirus, the NHS and hospitals and everything are completely swamped anyway. And it is very weird how it's all of a sudden coronavirus is such like hasn't become or it hasn't stayed as the main definer of 2020. You don't really see it anymore in the news. It's mental.
No, I know you look at it and you're like, we haven't even, well, I mean, we're technically halfway through the year now, kind of.
Yeah.
We're kind of halfway through the year now, but like, people keep saying that phrase throughout the entire year, just, well, it can't get any worse, and it keeps getting worse, and it keeps getting worse. And it's just, I think if we just say, someone out there jinxed it. They were like, can't get any worse than COVID-19, and then
this happened.
But I think there's the argument that I guess a civil rights movement shouldn't be considered as a negative thing. I think it is, in many ways, a good thing. So it shouldn't necessarily be just considered, oh, it's another bad thing for 2020.
I think there are two sides to this coin. And that because it's going on in the middle of a pandemic, having loads of people congregate in these relatively small, we'll go with small areas, like hundreds of thousands of people all kind of coming together. But then it's because they're all coming together, speaking about this one message and kind of using their voices to speak out on something that I think is so essential for us to talk about, is an amazing thing, and it's how we create change. And I think I've actually seen some, whether it's actually on the news in terms of like TV, but I've definitely seen that it's everyone that goes to these things are already wearing masks. Loads of people are wearing, you know what I mean? It's still a very safe environment in that people are looking after themselves whilst they're there.
Yeah.
So it's a hard one, because I also don't want COVID, but I
Right.
have so much admiration for the people that are going out and protesting and doing and fighting the good fight, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think it would, yeah, I think it would be wrong to criticize anyone of wanting to protest for such an important cause, really.
I know, and
Unfortunately, it comes at a problem. It comes probably the worst time when you want to have mass protesting, but in a way, there is very little that can replace that kind of influence that the protests are having.
yeah, and I think with what was originally broadcast with all this, obviously you originally saw the George Floyd footage, which is what kind of sparked all of this in the first place. But I noticed that a lot of media, as soon as I suppose these peaceful protests stopped becoming as peaceful, was that immediately the media played this narrative of, look at all these people doing this negative, look at all of them looting and getting angry and attacking police, and it just completely switched the narrative to, at least I think, kind of scare people even more who were kind of like aside from the protesters themselves, to just present these people in such a negative way and almost reinforce these racial stereotypes of black people as
Mm,
criminals, and they're inherently bad people and all this kind of stuff.
but I do agree that that a lot of people have been scared because all they can see is what it looks like at face value, and for what a lot has been reported, it looks just on face value that other people are attacking police officers for no reason.
Yeah, and it's
And
it's hard to watch what a lot of again, it's this narrative that they're projecting. And I recently read a book, which is essentially called How Fear Works,
mm,
which is all to do with how the media a lot of the times control how we think and feel about situations by showing us only what they want us to see,
mm,
which I think is happening a lot with. And I know that obviously there are, if you look for it, you can see both sides, both the positive and the negative. But I think what gets broadcasted the most, at least at the minute, now that things aren't necessarily as in control as they used to be, are this they're telling us this idea that these, look at them, that all they're doing is using this as a way to get their own back and this kind of thing. And I'm like, well, I know that's kind of what protests are. First of all, that's
yeah,
kind of what
yeah,
the whole aim is. um
yeah.
but it takes me back to the whole thing of just put yourself in their shoes. If you had gone through hundreds and I don't even know thousands of years of oppression, and what I mean, still be treated like less than what you are, would you not be that angry? Would you not
Mm,
feel the same, because you're being denied what everybody else is allowed to have, which is just human decency?
yeah.
you know
Yeah, again, it's a little bit of empathy, which I think there's a lot of people, including um, people like me as well, that just it would, a little bit more empathy in some of these times would really give certain arguments more context, because I think that, again, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not happening.
I know, and I just think, regardless of how people feel about the situation, just talking about uh, racism, because that's what is at the core of everything that's happening right now. Just talking about race and racism, and just opening up those conversations, not just kind of shutting everything that's happening down as just noise, listening to what these people are saying. And I think that's what I intended to do with both my blog and everything that I've said, like even on here and just outside of it in general. And I don't think this is going to be a thing where there comes to a point where I just kind of I understand it all, and everybody will need to keep learning about this. This
Mm,
is, what I mean. We're all going to have to continue to read I think even talking to one of my tutors, actually, she said that to watch 12 Years a Slave is very much a powerful experience in the current environment.
Yeah.
And it's just, I want to become a better person. I want to understand everything that's going on and just hopefully make a little bit of difference with what I'm saying, what I'm putting out there. And honestly, if anything that I've said in this entire thing is wrong, I want people to call me out on it, because I know that there's probably something that I've missed or messed
Yeah.
up on.
Yeah, yeah, I don't think anyone is able to know 100% about every single 100% about every single topic. I know that there is a lot of people, particularly on Facebook, that will believe that they know 100% about everything. But I think to go in with the attitude of saying that you always want to know more and know better is really important. We've talked a lot about so far. I mean, it looks like nearly 45 minutes, I think, of recording. Um, to on the sort of big subject, I guess. What are the main takeaways that you think after we've discussed all this? What are the main takeaways that do you think that people need to think about?
I think that, and I know that I'm guilty of before now, not sometimes crossing the street, and all the little banal things that you probably wouldn't think about when it comes to somebody of a different, of a black person of a different race, whatever it is, to just be self-aware in what you're doing. Make the effort to learn. There's so many resources out there. So some of the books that I found as well, which I'm going to invest in personally, are Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race by Rennie Edo-Lodge. There's Diversify by June Sapong, Brit in brackets Ish by Afua Hirsch. All of those kind of books that you can find online and order. There's so many resources with petitions people can sign, where you can donate money, even if you don't go to a protest. This is something that I've included in a lot of my posts. You can protest from even behind a computer, just in the safety of your own home. You can still project that message and just try and make a change, even if it's just in yourself, because racism is something that is so ingrained and is almost at the heart of a lot of our, even just our British society, but especially in America, and it's everywhere. And for us to beat it, to overcome it, means that I think we have to start looking a little bit inward and having that conversation with ourselves and with other people.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you there. I think the main takeaways for I don't really know if I need to add anything to the takeaways of the main topic.
I
That's
think
pretty much
that
summed up.
one of the other ones for me would, for British people to actually start listening to government guidelines, and for
Yeah,
people to
yeah.
stop coughing on other people, because that happens and that really
Mm,
bugs
I
me.
think yeah, I think it's instead of instead of instantly trying to cut out, because I think everyone on every side of the argument of whatever we talk about is always guilty of doing this, is instantly repelling against the idea of a different opinion, and just ask a little bit more. Don't just instantly say, all right, get out of my life, you don't agree with me. Try and understand why someone would feel that way.
Yeah,
Understand
100%.
where they're coming from and what they mean, because you will, knowing more about anything will always make you a better person.
Yeah, I
Learning.
agree with that.
Yeah, I definitely, all the things we talked about in the video, the books and everything like that will definitely be linked in the description of the video, which will be good.
Yeah, I think there's just, like I said, I will. You've obviously got the document, but I'll send you over any links that I have, and I'll definitely be posting about this. I think, if anything, because I know that I'm in a very privileged position to just be learning about this, not experiencing it. It's a
Yeah.
privilege to have to do that. I will obviously hold my hands up and say that I didn't know anything about this pretty much until a few weeks ago. I still don't know a lot now. I've just tried to do as much research as I
Mm.
can, and I am very passionate, and I think in some ways very emotional about this. It's so upsetting to just even look at, to even hear people talk about a lot of the time.
Mm.
So if I've said
It's-
anything wrong, if anybody's
mm.
got offended, please tell me, because I want to learn, and I don't want this to be seen as I think I'm better than you because I'm talking about it. It's not. It's none of that. It's none of that.
Yeah, definitely. I think you mean for the first episode of what is to become hopefully quite a long series of videos. It's one heck of a topic, one heck of a deep
Bit heavy.
topic.
Bit heavy.
Bit heavy, yeah, but I think sometimes the people who are people with like big followings, especially on things like social media and stuff like that. Again, not to say that I'm massive big entrepreneurial YouTuber or whatever, sometimes you find that people listen to your opinion and what you do more than you realize,
Yeah.
especially once you get to a point where you start getting fans who really look out for what you do, and sometimes not being afraid to not just have an opinion on something, but like sort of speak out in a good way can make a massive difference on whether other people do the same.
So I know just as a few personal recommendations that I've seen. So Lily Reinhart, who you may know from Riverdale, has been doing a lot of live streams recently,
Oh yeah.
where she's had black men and women, and just in general people coming on and just talking about their experiences. And it's a lot of her just listening.
Yeah.
Um, there's a study tuber from the UK called Jack Edwards who's done a lot of similar stuff. I think even on YouTube you can find some of his videos, and it's quite. I like what you said there about actually not being afraid to talk about it. So I know another YouTuber called Unjaded Jade, who's recently made a video obviously talking about everything that's been going on, but openly admitted that although she's been learning over the last few years about the whole issue itself, was actually so afraid about talking about it because she didn't want to say something wrong, and she didn't feel like she had learnt enough, which I kind of felt when I started like looking into it, thinking this is a very deep rabbit hole, and
Mm.
I don't want to, just jump on the bandwagon and just post a black square on my Instagram, or make a comment on Facebook just because I feel like I need to show my support. And I
Mm.
think for a lot of people, don't just share something or say something just because you think you have to. You can do one thing and then you've done your part. If you're
Yeah.
gonna if you're gonna be supportive and you're gonna share this, that, and the other, do whatever in regards to the movement, that then make sure you do educate yourself. Because
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to be talking about it if I didn't have some kind of knowledge
Mm.
and understanding. I think people can still do their part without
Mm.
necessarily being I think the term for it is like a performing activist, where just because
Mm.
everything's going on, you're playing that part. Don't do that, first of all. um
Yeah.
I think, like I said, we will obviously link all the resources, but there are so many anti-racism resources, particularly for white people who may know nothing about it, like myself a few weeks ago. I've signed so many petitions, even not just for George Floyd, but all of the other victims of police brutality, to kind of help bring, I think, like British colonialism into, the history curriculum in schools. There's so many steps that can be taken, and if you can afford it, there's so many places you can donate to, Black Lives Matter charities, and just honestly, if you just look for it, you will find it. There's so much stuff. And like the books that I've mentioned and that we'll link are also really important. So I still haven't read them yet. I know I've already said, but I think it's important for me to kind of understand the history, and from another Black person's perspective of what, you know, of what's going on. Just we need a little bit more understanding, I think, is the whole aim of this. We need a bit more understanding.
Yeah, I think that is a good sort of way of looking at it. Just, you know, understand more of it, and hopefully everything will you know, when more people will understand what's going on and why people feel certain ways, they'll be more willing to accept their feelings about that.
And I think we just need to make sure that we all vote in here and in America. Please, everyone. Because I didn't realise that our MP for at least Shropshire was a Conservative, who before now has actually voted against equal rights for gay people and has voted against same-sex marriage and all of these very awful things. So from now on, I'm actually going to be paying attention to politics, and
Yeah,
you know,
it has a lot. Yeah, politics. I feel like this issue, being of course a big civil rights thing, definitely does weave a lot into politics. So yeah, definitely vote. That is number one.
bring
That is
Obama
good.
back. Bring Obama back.
Yeah, we just love Obama.
I know.
What?
I
He was
know.
just not only did he did so many great things, he was just so cool.
I know.
He was just so chill.
And then we've
Honestly.
currently got a flaming Cheeto trying to speak speak for all Americans, honestly. But yeah, I think I've said my I could honestly, I feel like I could talk about it forever. And there's stuff that I haven't even yet mentioned that's in, you know, all the research that I've done. But it's a very long conversation. It's going to be a continuous argument. And again, if anybody wants to talk to me more about it outside of this or wants to find out more about what I do, you can find me on Facebook or even
On
check out my website.
Davies Creative Co. As you say, you've got the blogs coming up, so
Yep.
there's going to be more of that. You recently interviewed the team leader of Whisper, Lucy, which was pretty cool. So yeah, if you enjoyed, I mean, I guess if you enjoyed what you hear, please check us out on social media. I mean, if you're here, I guess you already know about my social media. Probably, I don't know. Maybe someone just randomly landed on this video and
If you
decided
did,
to watch the entire
hi.
thing. Yeah, hello, welcome.
Yeah.
But,
Well,
um,
it's been nice to speak to you again. I know it does feel like a lifetime ago when we did that live stream. It does. I
it
don't even remember when
was,
it was. I don't even remember when it was.
no, it was quite a while ago. I think it was probably in like the first couple weeks of lockdown. And
God.
again, it just feels like the first couple of weeks of lockdown feel like a lifetime ago.
So it's on 2020's track record. We've had the Australian wildfires. We've had coronavirus. Honestly, I think because the whole consensus was that this was a new decade, so it was going to be like, you know, we're all gonna. It's 2020 is going to be everybody's year, and I think this is somebody's way of saying no. No, it
Yeah,
will not.
no, no.
So
Although
hopefully,
I remember hearing a quote, I remember hearing, I think I need to find it and link it below. It was a while ago since I watched it, but it was this, it was on the Russell Howard show, and there was this guy that went on, and he was a black guy, and he basically um, made like a TV series. Was it a TV series? I don't know, but he was known for basically sitting down with members of the KKK and then just talking to them. And
okay.
it was such an interesting thing. And I remember him talking, it was about Trump actually, about the idea that once Trump is gone, everyone, whether they're black, white, whatever, they'll all be equally hurt by, you know, this person, so that they'll all be on the same level and then they'll have to rebuild together. And I think I quite
Okay.
liked that idea, like especially with something like COVID-19. I think with everything that's happening at the moment, I think like there's everything has happened that everyone will be heard at some point this year. So
Yeah.
everyone will be in a sort of similar place. So hopefully we can see 2021 where we see people trying to rebuild together.
Yeah, I like that. I hadn't heard that. I like that. I
I
think
know. I'm not.
my biggest not necessarily wish, because either way I'm going to be moving back down to Cornwall for the next for my second year. But
Yeah.
I hope that when I move when we go back, that there has been some change implemented, not not only there but everywhere, because I when I read honestly when I read that article about what these people speaking out about what they've experienced at uni and just everywhere else, it's so massive and so scary and upsetting, and just all of those emotions, that I hope we can get to a place where we are all equal, regardless of race,
Mm,
gender, sexuality, all of that. Because I think something that I heard before is that we'll take feminism as an example, is that in
yeah.
order to regain some sort of balance and equality, you have to tip the scale to then get it back
Mm,
to the center. And I think for so long it's been, you know, white people up here and black people down here, this kind of superiority
mm,
complex that for whatever reason, I think it's now kind of done that. It's gone the opposite way. And I think once we found some kind of resolution, it will be a level playing field. We will be
yeah.
a stronger and less segregated, hopefully,
Yeah.
community. Also hope that coronavirus goes
Yes. I
away
guess.
at some point, but
Oh,
you know. Oh god, it's not over
oh,
yet.
it's not. Right. Again, I've lost track of everything to do with COVID-19. Really. You know. Um. Yeah. COVID is in. Yeah. But it does look like it's improving. I know that there's been a lot of sort of tension around the lifting of lockdown, but at the moment the numbers are looking good. That's all I will
Yeah.
say. Is that numbers look good, but things could change. So I guess everyone just needs to stay wary of it.
Everybody stay safe. This is a public service announcement. Stay safe and wash your damn hands.
Mm. Or as the government say, stay alert.
Oh god.
Oh,
Oh,
blimey. So I guess we'll wrap this up then.
I know. I think everyone's heard us talk for long enough.
I think so. Let's hope people enjoy it. Again, as I said, this is the first of what hopes to be many. So who knows?
Stay tuned, people. Stay tuned.
Yes, and as I said, follow all of us after our complete rant, probably against social media. Follow us on
Just blame social media. It's the bane of everybody's existence.
It's
It's
the bane of
fine.
everything. Mm. And this social media post is brought to you by.
Oh, terrible. Okay.
Uh,
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Um,
It's been good to
you're
speak to you.
welcome. Thank you so much for coming on. This was a pretty tough topic to cover, but I think that you were definitely the right person to do it with.
We'll see. Um,
We'll,
hopefully we
we'll
don't get
see.
much backlash. I'm joking. It's gonna go down a treat. It's gonna go down a treat.
Absolutely. People love us, I'm sure.
Well,
Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for coming on, and I think we'll end it here. Thank you everyone who's watched until this point. It's a long episode, but thank you, very much appreciated, and I will see you again at some point. And make sure to follow Jazz as well.
thank you.
So see ya.
Thanks everyone.
Okay.
Do we end the how do I end this recording? Do I have to end the call?